It's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White, and it's episode 374. Welcome to the week of 31 March 2024, which really should be April Fool's, but it almost was, so maybe next year. We've got Lena, XZ, WallEscape, AT&T, OWASP, Google, Microsoft, AI, Josh Marpet, and more on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for the Security Weekly News.
On Business Security Weekly, each week we address the challenges facing CISOs through our guest interviews, including former and active CISOs. Our news segment is focused on leadership and communications to better help security leaders translate and communicate security risks into business risks. Jason Albuquerque, Ben Carr, Tyler Robinson, and others add their expertise to the conversation. I'm Matt Alderman, and I hope you search for Business Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher and subscribe to download our latest content.
All right, from exile in the island of Elba, it's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White, and welcome to the show. All right, this week, Red Hat issued a warning about Fedora, not about Red Hat, but about Fedora, which is their open source version of Red Hat. They apparently found a backdoor in the latest XZ utils data compression tools and libraries. Ew, that's on everything. The warning said, quote, "Please," and it was in all caps, "please immediately stop usage of any Fedora 41 or Fedora Rawhide instances for work or personal activity," in all caps. No versions of Red Hat Enterprise Linux are affected. Debian's security team issued a warning about the issue as well. This thing is in like just about everything. Their advisory from Debian says that there are no stable Debian versions that are using the compromised packages, but it sounds like maybe some of their unstable betas and whatever are at risk. So if you're using like rolling updates and all that kind of stuff, Kali, OpenSUSE, and Arch Linux also published advisories about this and have reversed versions in their rolling releases. So they are rolling all this stuff back to the older version so they can avoid this problem. You can check which version of XZ is installed by querying your package manager. If you don't know how to do that, you can Google it, obviously. But there is a shell script in the article that will pull it for you. So if you want to get that, go to that article there, you can copy and paste it and it will pull that out. I looked at the shell script. It looks safe to me. Basically, if you're using versions 5.6.0 or 5.6.1, which are the newest ones, then the advisory is that you need to downgrade to an older version that doesn't have the malicious code embedded in it. CISA issued a warning as well, advising to downgrade to version 5.4.6 stable. Andres Freund, who found the issue, said that they're not sure what the purpose of it is, but that it was added to the liblzma data compression library in versions 5.6.0 and 5.6.1 by a contributor named Jia Tang. But said that it appeared to allow some kind of access or other form of remote code execution. Probably most of the distros will have updates. So, get in there and run that update somehow, or manually do it or roll back or whatever you want to do, but be careful. So as long as we're on Linux, there's apparently a vulnerability in the good old wall command of the util Linux package as well. This vulnerability has been named WallEscape, and it's apparently been in every version of the package for the past 11 years up to 2.4, which was released last week. So they just patched it. It sounded like one of those really old school type of things to me. It was like one of those hacks you found out about back in like the 90s or even older. Basically, you can't do it remotely, but if you have access to a Linux server that has multiple users connected at the same time through the terminal, like every server everywhere, well, then this can be used to trick users into giving up their credentials. Now, if you don't know what it is, wall is a command which is used to broadcast messages to the terminals of all the users logged into the server. Improper control of the escape sequences that can be pushed into this thing allows the creation of a fake pseudo prompt. And as such, people are sitting there working, and a message pops up that says sudo on it, and people apparently type their pseudo password in, and then of course that is passed back to the originator of this hack, and that of course can then mean that the originator can use that to exploit sudo to get control of the server. Yeah, so very old school kind of stuff. But users are advised to upgrade to Linux Utils version 2.40, which is a patch for this. The update may not be available on your platform yet, although they're rolling them out, but you can mitigate it by removing the set GID permission from the wall command or disabling the message broadcast functionality, which you probably should do anyway, using the message command with the in flag if you've never had to do that. We used to have to do that a lot because people would jump into the servers and they would start sending out all kinds of just annoying messages. They weren't necessarily hacking anybody, but there were floods where people wrote scripts that just popped, endless commands up saying you're a doofus or whatever. And, it got really annoying. So typically we disable these things. Um, on our old systems. This one's more annoying, I guess, since of course they can get your password by getting you to type it in. There's a lot of detail about how this works and how to do it and so forth in the article if you're interested. And there's also details about how to mitigate it if you're interested. Well, AT&T, which is one of the largest telcos in the world, confirmed that the reputed leak from earlier that they had denied did indeed happen, and that 73 million records were actually affected. AT&T reset the passcodes of 7.6 million users in response to this. The leaked data was published on the dark web sometime in March, like in the middle of March, and it appeared to contain only data from 2019 and older. So this was archived data or something like that. AT&T said that the breach affects 7.6 million current users and 65.4 million former account holders. They had previously denied that this data came from their systems and said, no, this is not ours. We don't know where it came from, blah, 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 blah. Corporate legal this, corporate legal that, something, 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 not responsible. But they did not say whether it contained accurate records at all. So they basically said, no, not us. We are no further comment. But TechCrunch called them out and basically forced them to acknowledge that the leak had indeed happened and it had indeed come from their system. Most of the damaging things that were leaked in this were passcodes. And if you don't know what that means, it sounds like a good thing, but it's really not in this case. These are those 4-digit PIN numbers that apparently some sites and services are still using. Every time I see one of those, I'm like, really, guys? Um, you know, but anyway, Sam Chicken Man Crowley found this and was able to. I love the name Chicken Man. Was able to reverse. There was a Chicken Man in Iraqistan when I lived there, or Arkansas, as we all know it. But it wasn't involving hacking. It involved chickens, and my friend was the social worker on the case. But regardless, but anyway, Chicken Man was able to reverse all these codes to plain text by using clues from the data set. So apparently the encryption was derived from various components in the data set, and they were able to do this without cracking the encryption. The data contained email, date of birth, social security numbers, and passcodes, along with names, mailing addresses, and AT&T account numbers. Yikes. The 49 million unique addresses in the leak have been added to Have I Been Pwned, so you can check yours out. I would be, maybe want to recaution your people about if they're getting messages from AT&T supposedly with, spear phishing type information like their account numbers. But I also would suggest that you encourage people to use multi-factor and, get rid of passcodes wherever possible. But if nothing else, be sure you've changed them, although AT&T forced you to change it if you've logged in. So, that. Well, OWASP said that a wiki misconfiguration exposed resumes from their site that were filed over a decade ago. Yeah. So, where did you send your old resumes? So much like AT&T, old data can still be a huge liability out there, and old data is out there. I mean, I don't know how often you review, stuff that's still up. I mean, this was, has always been an issue in the sense that people would always be targeting old servers. So this was some of the earliest network scanning and in-map scanning stuff, Satan scanning. all that stuff that was going on back in the 90s was looking for old servers that were still being maintained, but maybe they weren't being maintained, but they were still sitting out there. So OWASP said a misconfiguration on an old wiki server resulted in the exposure of resumes that aspiring members had to submit more than 10 years ago. Now, I don't know if you ever went to OWASP site a long time ago, but when they first set this up, they required you to submit a resume in order to be a member of OWASP. And a lot of people did that. I could not remember if I did that or not. So I probably did. But regardless of that, OWASP was launched in 2001, and you had to send a resume to be a member between 2006 and 2014. The exposed information included names, addresses, phone numbers, emails, and other personal information. So the moral is, I guess, maybe scan yourself regularly and check for weird old lumps laying around in darkened rooms. One time we were looking for this email server that we found in a scan and nobody could find it. It wasn't on the network diagram. Imagine that. It wasn't on the asset list. Imagine that. But we had literally found it by chasing the wires. And we found the wires. They ran down into the basement, through a conduit, under the street, across, down the block, and came up in an old firehouse that was still in use. And in the bottom of a closet, covered in old firefighting equipment, including boots, gloves, coats, you name it. Guess what? There was a pizza box server sitting there with no monitor, no keyboard, no nothing, and it was still running. It was running SUSE, in fact, and it was chugging along, and no one knew it was there for years and years. So we just turned it off. And of course, immediately the help desk lit up with like, "Hey, why did my email stop working?" And it's like, oh my God. But anyway, I still keep trying to look for an old Vmail server I left in these steam tunnels when I left that job in another state. I did leave a Vmail server sitting in a steam tunnel with no monitor, no keyboard, covered it up with a bunch of old junk because I thought that way I'll have email in the future. It's probably still there. I wish I could remember the IP address, but I bet I could find it. That thing must be old, real old. Well, Google, good old Google, don't be evil, has agreed to destroy web browsing data it collected and then said could not be deleted from users browsing in Chrome's private browsing modes. Yeah, private browsing mode, incognito. I love it. But in an attempt to settle a lawsuit that was filed back in 2020 that claimed Google had made misleading claims about privacy with their incognito modes, which is about like walking into a peep show in a trench coat and hoping no one notices. Yeah, I mean, maybe you don't remember those old days where you'd walk past on 8th Avenue and you see all the peep shows and there's guys in trench coats. And I'm like, you don't think anybody noticed you? Yeah, right. But anyway, the lawsuit is about the claim that users could control what information Google collects. But basically, they just collected whatever they wanted to anyway. Now, the lawsuit says that the tracking tools at Google, like Google Analytics and Google Ad Manager, are going to automatically track users regardless of what browsing mode they were using. Incognito mode, if you actually look it up or read the agreements or whatever, incognito mode only keeps things from going into your local browsing history. So, if you don't want people to, come in and sit down at your machine and pull down your browsing history, yeah, that's stopped by incognito mode. But Google still knows what you're looking at. Oh, yeah, they knows where you have been. Pepperidge Farm remembers, and they probably got that data stored somewhere. Google had already been sanctioned in this case for over $1 million for concealing details during discovery about what it can detect with users in incognito mode. So they already got busted by the court once on this. Who knows what else they did? But yeah, I remember when their motto was "Don't be evil." Remember they had it printed on the side of the building? Yeah, that kind of stuff. I don't think they use that logo anymore. But the proposed settlement is about $5 billion with a B dollars. And it sounds like the only people who would get any settlements out of this was if you were not logged into your Google account or didn't have a Google account. Because if you're logged in, they pretty much own you. They can do whatever they want. So if you log into a Google account with your user ID, you have essentially clicked OK on the "do anything you like to me. It's fine." Will that actually fit there? I'm not sure, but Google says they get to. But regardless of that, even if if you were not logged into Google and you were using incognito mode, there was some paths for settlement. They had two different classes in the class action suit. Now, I'm not an attorney. I can't interpret this for you, but I think if you have a Google account, you probably did agree to everything and you're not going to get anything from this settlement. It's unclear to me, but basically, if you thought incognito mode meant you were incognito, Well, remember that time you saw your Uncle Bert in a raincoat walking up to that place on West 33rd that sold marsupial porn? And then you kind of nodded to him and he kind of nodded back. And then you went home and sat in the shower for 3 hours crying. Yeah, I don't either, but you've been warned. All right. Microsoft released Copilot for security, but that yesterday. So this Microsoft put this out, but the U.S. House of Representatives had banned the use of this chatbot by House staffers on the 29th. Now, the House had also banned the use of Chat GPT last summer. Apparently, the House Office of Cybersecurity deemed Copilot a risk to users because it could leak House data to non-approved cloud services. I mean, this is basically saying you shouldn't talk about classified things with non-classified personnel, like in a bar. That was a training I went to. They were like, if a woman walks up to you in a bar and starts asking a question about your job, you should A, spill the beans, B, say, no thanks, honey. I know what you're up to, you Nazi commie bastard. Of course, I was like, if a woman walks up to me in a bar, I know something's up right then because that's never, ever happened. My roommate used to have people walk up to him, but not me. No thanks. But especially if it's a chat bot that's controlled by someone else that you don't even know, that could be kind of chatty by definition. And it might actually take what you've asked about, put it into its data store, and start hallucinating who knows what with it. The launch codes, I don't know, call it virtual pillow talk. It's a problem. But I think it's going to get more difficult to control these sort of leaks because they're embedding AI in everything now, right? So no matter what you're using, it's got AI in it. And the AI is taking note of what you typed and, of course, sharing that with other people. But maybe there really are too many secrets, Marty. I'm not sure. But speaking of AI, and speaking of picking on Google today, this review of the new Google search experience, which is called SGE, which stands for Search Generative Experience, is the AI version of a search engine. I mean, you got to have that now. It's kind of like you can't have security without AI now, right? But according to this article, which says that the alleged, quote, supercharged AI version of this seems to have actually made the Google search engine quite a bit dumber. One of the experimental questions they reported in this article was, what is Mark Zuckerberg's net worth? And in the old Google search, the traditional one, it said 169 billion US dollars, Dave. But that in the new AI supercharged version, it responded that Zuckerberg's net worth, these were actual questions and answers. Zuckerberg's net worth is $46.24 per hour or $96,169 per year. And then went on to say that that is the equivalent of $8,014 per month, $1,849 per week, or $230.6 million per day. Now, I don't know about you, but if you sat down with your calculator and you did this math, you'll realize it's completely wrong. And if you haven't watched Idiocracy in a while, and it is an election year, you might want to revisit that Mike Judge film because I think we're just about there. It's got what plants need. Exactly. But the SGE has been being tested with volunteers for about 11 months, and they've recently started showing AI generated answers even if you didn't opt in, apparently. Don't be evil. Maybe another lawsuit for Google? I don't know. But another question the author asked about this was, asked for a review of a noodle shop in San Francisco. The noodle shop they asked about does not actually exist. They made it up. The AI said that based on a Yelp review, I don't know where, I mean, maybe there's Yelp reviews of places that don't exist now too, but there was a Yelp review that said the place has long lines and crazy wait times. Now they went back a week later and they asked the questions again, and this time it said the lines were good at this time. Apparently, this is what we talked about this last week. This is called an AI hallucination. When the AI doesn't know how to respond, it just makes something up. And that can be dangerous, right? When you're going looking for this noodle bar in San Francisco. Yeah, after you spend 9 hours walking around Chinatown trying to find this place, and then you go, and somebody says, no, it doesn't exist. But anyway, I don't know. Kind of like a lot of humans, you might ask, like when you ask the concierge and they tell you, oh, I did this in Texas recently. I was like, because where there's a CVS and the concierge is like, yeah, it's a block down and 2 blocks over. I walked around for half an hour and I found out there was no CVS there, but got rid of me, I guess. Anyway, understand AI is just like a human being. If you tell a baby that squid people are bad, what with the ink and the slime and all that and the smell, the kid's going to grow up hating and fearing squid people, even if they don't actually exist. The kid may be hiding in a closet in the house when they're 22 years old going, oh, no, I'm afraid to go out because of the squid people. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. And that's how you get chuds, AI virtual chuds even. I mean, the article went on to show that in a sample of 100,000 keyword searches, the most common citation this thing used was, wait for it, was it the Encyclopedia Galactica? Was it Majel Barrett? Nope, it was Quora. Yeah, that makes me feel so much better about our future. You bet. Right. Well, in a village of La Mancha, the name of which I have no desire to call to mind, there lived not long since one of those gentlemen that keep a lance in the lance rack, an old buckler, and a lean hack, and a greyhound for coursing, and that gentleman is none other than Josh Marpet. Hi, Josh.
We're back to chuds, are we?
We gotta have Chuds. I mean, come on. It's like we're changing the name of the show to Chud Security Weekly.
Well, I mean, honestly, we're going to be able to change the name of the show in the near future because I don't know if you heard, but on this amazing international holiday that was yesterday, a gentleman named Adam Shostak actually came out with something that ends our profession entirely. He came out with magic security dust. All you have to do is sprinkle it over every computer, every server, every application. And this is important, all of the serverless code. And it just, it locks it all down. It's totally done. So
it just sounds,
I had to bring this up because it's important that as it ends our industry, we should just, close out and be done with it. All of us should turn into basically probably chuds of some sort or another.
I told this guy one time, before you boot your machine, always press the F1 button 3 times. I bet you today that guy is still out there when he's booting up a machine on his desktop, pressing the F1 button 3 times. Yeah, he's probably still doing it if he's not dead. But if you're out there, sorry.
I had to put the magic security dust in there, but there is an actual story in the queue, and that's one that I'm putting on here because I don't want to be nice, and so it's about a hacker mindset. And this is an article in Dark Reading actually about, which is surprising because Dark Reading is normally pretty darn good. I mean, I've had a lot of great articles there, or read a lot of great articles there. This one I don't like. It's a great article about how to, and it's titled "How to Build the Hacker Mindset in Your Staff," and instilling the hacker mindset organization wide. And then it goes into your basic, like have them look at Hack the Box and watch Capture the Flags and make sure that their visibility into things is great. Create security allies. I mean, these are all good things, but that's not the hacker mindset. And it bothered me. And I wanted to talk about that for a minute because I've actually been talking to a lot of people about defining what we do and defining the terminology and defining all of the different pieces of security and compliance and risk and all of these things, because they are all bundled, if you will, together. And if we can't talk apples to apples about things, it's hard to even have a discussion. But so when somebody says this, the hacker mindset is making sure that people know what a bug bounty program is. I'm like, no, that's not the hacker mindset. You can be a hacker and not touch a keyboard. A hacker, to me, and this is my definition, I'd love to hear what people have to say, but a hacker is someone who looks for the unintended functionality, looks for the edges of the system and sees what's beyond the edge, looks for the places that the organizer, the developer, the programmer, in some cases, didn't realize what they were building or didn't realize what holes they had left. And then not necessarily with a malicious mindset, but, what does this do? And that's the hacker mindset to me. It's the mindset of, I'm going to not necessarily solve a problem. I might cause a problem, but I'm sure as hell going to explore and find out what's going on over around that corner, over top of that mountain, and climb that thing. Why? Because it's there. And so when I see an article that purports to instill the hacker mindset in your organization, and then just, to be honest, I mean, and it's good stuff, but it's retreading tired ground. Okay, don't do that, please. I write blog articles and I write articles all the time, and I'm actually starting to write more and more, which is good. I need to get back into it. And I guess now I have to write an article about how to instill the hacker mindset. And the answer is really, you can't. A hacker mindset is something that you have. You can cultivate it, but unless you have that sort of grain in you, you're probably not going to get it. And it's curiosity and creativity and probably an inability to write in cursive, but details. So if you want to take the chuds and turn them into hackers, you have to do it with people that are actually creative and thoughtful and think around corners. It's the only way to actually have that hacker mindset. I mean, I run hacker conferences, and crap, if you wanted me to code something and or do a pen test on something, I'd probably laugh at you. Okay. The last time I seriously coded, and I'm not joking, I coded it in VB6. This is before Visual Basic.NET and the Visual Studio. Okay. I've done little things like some bash scripts and Arduino stuff, but like that's nothing, no big deal. But, and the last time I did a pen test, seriously, was, I don't remember. It's been a long time. I've been working in the compliance world for a while now, but I still consider myself effectively a hacker because I'm always looking for where did the people who wrote those standards, where did the people that built that security and architected that piece, that entire organization, where did they forget? What did they forget? Where did they forget it? Why did they forget it? And how do we fix that in the next version of the standard or the controls or the whatever? Okay. And that's exactly what we all do. And anybody that says, well, only pen testers are hackers is wrong. Sorry, they're wrong. Hacker is a who you are, not a what you do. I mean, come on, look at Doug. He's a hacker. Mostly of people, we're not going to talk about a serial killer side, but I mean, he's definitely a hacker. He teaches it. He teaches people to look for those holes, look for those edges. That's still hacking. That's still hacking people's brains. The way I put it is, yeah, I stopped hacking computers and I started hacking people. It's actually fascinating because they're never consistent. And so it's interesting to me. And I'm not yelling at the guy that wrote this article. I don't want to say, oh, you're a horrible person. I respect what they did. They're trying to tell people, hey, you can imbue security into your entire world, into your entire organization. But that's not the same thing as a hacker mindset. And I guess I'm nitpicking really badly, and I'm sorry, but it bugged me. And so I wanted to talk about it for just a couple of minutes. As hackers, as security professionals, as InfoSec and compliance and risk management, as hackers, all of them can be, not all of them are, but all of them can be. Our job is to find out where our architecture, where our systems are constrained, where there are holes, where there are problems, and then fix them. And you can do that from all of those perspectives. That perspective, that mindset, is the fascinating piece to me. Doug, as an educator, I'm curious what you think.
I completely agree with you. I think the key to what you said was the word cultivate. I think that you can't take just any given person and produce them as a hacker. You have to have that imagination and that ability to think around a corner. And I think imagination is one of the key things to it, because there's a lot of people who you tell them to push the F1 key 3 times before you boot the machine. They'll still be doing that 30 years later because that was what it said to do. Whereas if you tell a hacker, press the F1 key 3 times before you boot the machine, the very first thing they're going to do is press it 4 times and see what happens. I mean, that's that hacker mentality. And that doesn't have to apply to a keyboard. It can apply to literally anything. And that was there were two kinds of programmers in the world. There were liberal programmers, as they described them, which were sort of gonzo, crazy, throw it against the wall and see what happens programmers. And then there were these very, very methodical accounting type programmers, these very conservative programmers. And, there's room for everybody in this space. But if you want to call yourself a hacker, you need to start immediately thinking around corners. So I think being able to cultivate that is something you should be doing. I don't think you can train every single person up to think like that. Some people see the thing that says press button to call for help, and they press the button when they need help. Other people are going, what would happen if I press the button twice? And of course, then you get the more extreme hackers who are like, what if I take the whole button off the wall and build my own button that does something completely different and sends, strange codes down to the system to see if I can disrupt the world. So yeah, I do completely agree with you about that article. I read that as well on Dark Reading today. So 100% I agree. Thank you, Josh. And finally, so this was kind of a classic tale of computer science. I saw this headline and I remembered this very vividly. So back in 1972, Miss December was the Playboy centerfold, if you don't remember those days, and you probably don't. But Miss December of 1972 was a person named Lena Forson. And oddly, or maybe not oddly, this image became an important component of both computer science image processing research, as well as an important controversial issue in computer science for people. So originally, there was this assistant professor named Alexander Sawchuk and a grad student at the University of Southern California Signal and Imaging Processing Institute, and they scanned. This is very early stuff. They scanned a square. I think it was 512 by 512 of the centerfold. No nudity, nothing like that. Just the model from like the shoulders up, and it's a famous picture. And they used what is called a drum scanner. And if you've never seen one of these things, look it up because it's very interesting device. They used it to. It's a crazy gadget that just spins this stuff through, and it slowly builds up a picture of things. And of course, there were no nudity or anything in this picture. And they used this in a conference paper. And the image was so famous that it became known as the Lena image. Sorry, my grandmother's name was Lena, which is how this person spelled their name originally, but it's German. It's pronounced Lena. With and she actually put two N's in her name apparently for this Playboy thing. I didn't know all that, but I read it in the story. But it's basically created controversy ever since they used it. Well, the IEEE Computer Society has now stated officially that they will no longer accept any papers which include the Lena image. Now, originally, Lena had said in an interview back in like the 90s that she didn't really care about this and that she was pleasantly amused. That I think that interview was from 1988. But recently, I think it was 2019, she decided that she did not want this image being used all over the place and that she wasn't a model anymore. She didn't appreciate people using this. And they made a documentary about it. So it's gone. I mean, so basically, it's her image. She ought to be able to decide where it's used and where it's not used. But the image has been criticized for years because it was listed as being a sexually suggestive photo, even without any nudity in it. And, I mean, I honestly think, why are academics using these kind of images anyway? I mean, really, you couldn't find a picture of anything else, but it became a thing. You know how that stuff is. And everybody wanted, in their initial imaging papers and so forth to say they used the Lena image. So I don't know, maybe use a picture of a cat or something. Geez, come on, guys. Really. Anyway, well, that from the island of Elba, that is the news. Thank you, Josh. And I will see Josh again on Friday this week because Aaron is off in France, probably being arrested at this very moment by the gendarmes for skiing naked or something like that. I can't even imagine. But anyway, we will see you Friday on the Security Weekly News.